Welcome, everyone, to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, The Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, the 17-week journey toward living your essence and grounding higher realizations into your life. I'm Lisa Bonis, and I'm really excited to be hosting this Q&A conversation with the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Jessica Dibb and Russ Hudson and address questions about their upcoming 17-week course, The Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, which begins Thursday, August 9th. Later, I'll explain how you can participate in this course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guests. Russ Hudson is the co-founder of the Enneagram Institute and is one of the principal scholars and innovative thinkers in the Enneagram world today. He's also president of Enneagram Personality Types Incorporated, and he's been co-teaching the Enneagram professional training programs since 1991. He's a founding director and former vice president of the International Enneagram Association. Jessica Dibb is the founder, spiritual director, and principal teacher of the Inspiration Consciousness School, a school dedicated to promoting personal, relational, and planetary wellness. She's also the founder and host of the Shift Network's annual Enneagram Global Summit. Jessica teaches nationally and internationally, including teaching integrative breathwork and the Enneagram at the Psychotherapy Networker Conference. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Jessica and Russ. I'm glad we're all here together today. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. So, hi, everybody. Welcome. We'd love to just honor the great fortune that all of us have right now to spend this hour together. You know, every moment of life is precious, every breath. And in many ways, we could say that the path of awakening or the path of personal development, the path of spiritual development, is the increased capacity to receive the richness and the possibilities and the capacities of each moment. So we'd like to invite you and all of us to simply inhabit our breath right now as a way of bringing our attention to this present moment. And as we're inhabiting that breath, we become more aware of the sensations of our body and to trust those sensations. They are intelligent. And as we inhabit our breath, we become more aware of the feelings, the sensitivities, the receptivity of our heart. And to trust those feelings because they're intelligent. And as we continue to inhabit our breath, we become more aware of our capacity to actually pay attention to this moment, to be awake, to be aware, to listen, to be curious. And we can trust that it's intelligent. And so taking a few deep breaths through all of those capacities, the sensations, the feelings, and the awareness. Let's honor all of our choices to come here and be together to explore personal development and consciousness and awakening. Thank you for joining us. So ordinarily, we would just be doing a questions and answer for this whole time, but Russ and I decided we'd like to bring you a little bit of a mini workshop that gives us a taste of the learning community that we're trying to create for the 17 weeks. So Russ is going to do a little bit of teaching, about 8 to 10 minutes on the instincts, and then I'll do a little 5 or 6 minute practice about it, and then we'll open up to your questions and answers. So Russ?
Hi. The instincts are one of the topics I think that people are very much interested in the Enneagram these days, and some people call them subtypes, so you may have heard them under that name. But The instincts are really one of the most practical elements of the Enneagram teachings, and we'll be working with them a bit in this course. But I thought it would be kind of a fun extra to sort of do this in the Q&A as something a little different. The instincts, in one respect, are one of the most practical areas of the Enneagram work. In fact, when I consider coaching, for example, it's very hard to imagine coaching for a person that wouldn't, in some sense, be about the instincts, wouldn't be about dealing with how we balance these things. So what are they? First of all, I'd say, according to the original teachings of the Enneagram, the instincts relate to the first three centers, or the first three chakras. We tend to, when we first learn the Enneagram, combine them as the belly center. But the belly center is really three centers. And the first of them, related to the base of the spine and the sort of undercarriage of the body, is what's called the self-preservation instinct. And I think most of the teachers call it that. There's general agreement about that is a good name for it. This is the part of us that's concerned with survival, practicality, comfort and well-being, health, things like that. I'll break it down a little bit in a moment, but I just want to give you the overview first. And it's important to remember that the instincts are the intelligence of the earth, the intelligence of nature operating in us. This is the intelligence of the world as it manifests through our human bodies, as wisdom to live our lives well, to have the ingredients we need to survive on planet Earth. So they're actually something beautiful and amazing. And as we'll see, they can get distorted. So we mentioned self-preservation. The second one, which is located in the genital area, is the sexual instinct. You could also call it the attraction instinct. That would be a good term for it too. Some people call it intimacy or one-on-one. I personally don't prefer that particular name for it, simply because intimacy and that kind of feeling of heart connection is a heart matter. And as such, it's beautiful, but the sexual energy and our mojo, if you will, the activation energy of our nervous system is very important, and very important in spiritual practice. In India, for example, both yoga and tantra, these two great traditions, deal very much with how we work with our sexual energy. And so in deeper inner work, it's very important to discriminate and know in our direct experience the difference between for example, our sexual energy and our heart energy. Of course, we might experience a love and a connection with somebody and an attraction to them, but I think most of us can tell that those aren't exactly the same thing. We can have one without the other. The third is usually called social instinct. Some teachers use different names for it, but this is the instinct to be aware of other, to bond with other, to look after the other. And I've suggested that it began with the instinct to parent, to take care of the babies, which not all animals have. It was a rather recent development in terms of our evolution as life on the planet. So all of that could sound kind of abstract, but really, the instincts run our lives a lot more than we generally realize. And in some sense, they're easier to recognize in others than they are in, than say their Enneagram type. We can see, we know that people are kind of grounded, practical, take care of business. We know that people are kind of energetic, live wires, kind of intense, and a lot of kind of that charismatic sexual energy. That's another kind of person. And we know people who are very connective and aware of others and tuned in. And this runs independent of Enneagram type. When we use the term subtype, what we mean actually is the way particular Enneagram patterns and instincts mesh in certain patterns. And the idea behind that is if you can really get a handle on the particular dominant pattern between your instinctual life and your Enneagram pattern, then you have a real window into the core of your ego structures. And that becomes very useful for psychological work, but also for liberating ourselves, for the whole process of spiritual transformation. So what I want to suggest to everyone around the instincts is that, as with the Enneagram types, we get into a kind of shorthand and we'll say, I am a 4, I am a 5, she is a 6, he is a 7. And, it's a lot easier than saying that person's dominant fixation is a 7, or my dominant pattern is a 5, right? So you could get a lot more value from the Enneagram system, however, if you remember that this is not your identity. It's not my identity. I have a 5 pattern, but 5 is not me, what I am. It's a pattern. The same with the instincts. Everybody has all 3 of them. Have no doubt about that. Everyone has self-preservation energy. Everyone has sexual energy. Everyone has social energy. However, we have a particular relationship with each one of them. One of them we get over concerned with, and that's the one our Enneagram pattern mixes up with. We're over focused on it in a sense. We obsess about it. We think about it. We take care of it first. One of them is just kind of there doing its thing. When that part of life needs to get taken care of, it just gets taken care of. But the third one, and this is key for working with instincts, is what I've called the blind spot. And that's the instinct that I tend to procrastinate. It's not that I never do it, and it's not that I'm always terrible at it. If I were to contemplate, I'd realize sometimes I deal with it okay. But it's the last part of life that I deal with. I'm kind of reluctant to deal with it. It feels like taking time away from the dominant one. Now, in life, as with our Enneagram types, there's some fluidity about all of this. Sometimes you're in a certain life situation and a certain instinct will, if we're not too crazy, move into play because we actually need it at that time. I might not be particularly focused on self-pres, but if I get sick or injured, then I've got to focus on my well-being more. If I suddenly lose my job, I've got to start thinking about money. I might need to develop my social instinct because I have to do job interviews and understand what's needed for me to do that job. So I want to suggest to people that this is all a little bit more fluid and elastic than sometimes we all talk about it. It's not quite so concretized. But when we're stuck, when we're running our Enneagram pattern full blast, when we're really identified with our stuff, then it's also true that prioritization of our instincts will also be strong. So the way we work with this is through presence. We begin to see our specific relationship with these instincts. And it's a big topic. Eventually, I hope to do a whole course just on that. But you will see that as we get present with the instincts, we tend to just address them cleanly as they come up, and they tend to be more balanced. We tend to express them more naturally in a more free and clean way, and we are not so much preoccupied with some of them or neglecting some of them. So in the work we do with our type, inevitably we run into the instinct stuff, and in the work with the instincts, we run into our type stuff. But if you just remember, this is all in service to a kind of organic, presence-based self-understanding. We're trying to get a bigger sensibility to meet what the patterns that we take to be ourselves when we're not being particularly present or mindful. So maybe that's enough to say about that for now, but it's a huge topic. But I hope I've said some things that will be useful as you grapple with understanding this very important topic.
Thank you, Russ. So, I think one of the reasons people are instinctively, every pun intended, drawn to a deep curiosity and excitement about understanding about the instincts is that there's great promise here. It's kind of a cutting edge thing that these instincts are biological drives. And as Russ so beautifully described, they're inherent, they're nature within our own bodies. So there's no arguing with them. It's not like something we can create or destroy. There's an isness about it. And when we say there's an isness about it, that sort of reminds us of the great isness, I am, that is all things. And I think some of us instinctively have the sense that here's this thing that we can't create or destroy. It just is in our bodies. And it's going to operate very quickly. It's in motion in situations before we can ever think about it. So the promise of being able to bring, as Russ was talking about, presence to the isness of that, or presence to literally nature itself, something that our ego isn't creating or destroying, but maybe just utilizing, is, I think, just this cutting edge presence and these instinctual drives. So we wanted to just do a very short practice, and it's only really just, it is to honor these instinctual drives and also just to open up a bit of the territory about them. So if you would just, again, feel and inhabit your breath as it comes into your body. And let's take it down to the belly center that Russ was talking about. We're going to take a little tap into each of those centers Russ was articulating. So when you breathe, you can easily be aware that your diaphragm is moving, your belly is moving, and we want to invite you to relax into that. So often, many of us hold our bellies out of image consciousness or just incorrect breathing patterns that have happened for emotional reasons. But let's really settle into the belly with our breath. And now bring your awareness to the undercarriage, the base of the spine that Russ was talking about. With the breath and the sensations that are there. And we're just going to visit two places quickly. And one is aware of these sensations. Allow yourself with compassion and awareness to contact the part of you that would prefer to live rather than to die, that would even fight for your life, survival. And even if it seems very primitive to you, like, get that energy right there in your body there. You want to live and you would fight for your life. Now let's take a deep breath with that and honor that. And the intelligence of it. And also just to open up the awareness that with presence, this energy could become a powerful force for building a life that not only do we survive, but we thrive. We build a life that supports our deepest potential. And now continuing to breathe slowly and deeply with awareness of your belly center and the sensations there. You bring your awareness to the second part that Russ was talking about, the genitals, but in particular where the gonads and the ovaries would be about halfway between the pubic bone and the navel. I call that the soft under part of the belly. You just bring your awareness there. And now become aware, this is the sexual or attraction or what some people call one-on-one. And allow yourself to become aware of that part of you, that energy in you that just is drawn to things in a way that, like, I need that, I have to get to that, I want to break through with that, I'm attracted to that, it can even be a grasping and a a yearning of incredible proportions, and just breathe into that and honor it. There's an intelligence there. And while unconsciously, this could wreak a lot of havoc, just like an unconscious survival could wreak a lot of havoc, there is great energy here. And so as we continue to breathe deeply, also be aware of, if you brought presence to this energy, it could be utilized in the service of going for something that was for your deepest potential of your soul, your being, even to be awakened, to be in communion with life, with God, or with something that's greater than ourselves. And then lastly, let's breathe into our navel now, right into that area of the belly that goes from the navel out to the sides. There's kind of a more mid to upper belly. Aware of the sensations there. Allow yourself to honor and be aware of that part of you that wants to feel safe with others. Even maybe a sense of belonging that brings a sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense that you will be cared for, you will not be abandoned, you will not be outcast. And let's honor that energy. There's an intelligence there. And as we continue to take slow, deep breaths, we could also consider that if we could bring presence to this yearning or movement towards connection, towards other, towards nurturing, as Russ was saying, bonding, that we might be able to create a life that is in service not only to our own development and awakening, but to everyone else's too. And now maybe if we've been working these during this practice, it may be that our belly feels a little warmer. That would be good. Or it feels a little fuller, more full. Or just that you have a lot of sensation there. You may also have some feelings. And let's just take 3 deep breaths or so and say yes to this very practical potential in our lives. So thank you, everyone. And Russ and I would love now, Lisa, to dialogue with the community and take questions.
All right, great. Well, thank you both for that. For our viewers, we have the rest of our time together to dive into your questions for Jessica and Russ as we prepare for their upcoming course. Again, that's called the Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, which begins Thursday, August 9th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 17-week course, you can visit thedepthapproach.com to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. If you have a question for Russ and Jessica, just go ahead and type them in and I'll be happy to read them out loud. And we've already got some questions waiting, so let's go ahead and start with, this is a similar question from 2 people, so let me read. First, Jill says, can you be multiple numbers? For example, I'm a 7 with a wing of 8, and I often find myself being a 2 with multiple reasons flowing in the 2. Could the 2 be me functioning in my shadow? Or in other words, Steve asks, do we all have the 9 personality types within us, but favor one over the others?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russ.
That's a common question. in my experience, that we have some element of all 9 in us. And we certainly have the gifts of all 9 in potential. And we have also the some of the problems in each of them. I am not a 1 myself. I'm an Enneagram 5, but I have many of the challenges of Enneagram 1, and I also have some of the possibilities. So on that level, I hope you'd see and be able to relate to something about all 9 of the types. That being said, there are some of the points that have a bigger influence on us. Now, there are different theories and ideas about that. One of them is, as you said, there's a wing, which is on either side of our dominant type. So if I'm a 5, I can have a 4 or a 6 wing. If I'm a 3, I can have a 2 or a 4 wing. And that doesn't mean we're a second type. It's just sort of there's an influence of that second point on the way I express my 3-ness, to use that last example. There are also the inner lines, which we'll talk about in the course. They're psychodynamic patterns that are meaningful, that it takes some time to unpack what they mean. But for example, if I am an 8, I would expect to see some 2 and some 5 in the mix. If I'm a 2, I'd expect to see some 8 and some 4 in my mix, and so forth. And there are other theories. Some people teach about something called tri-type, which holds that we have a fixation or a primary point in each of the 3 centers. So between 8, 9, and 1, the belly types, there'd be 1 that's our belly fixation. 2, 3, and 4, the heart types, there'd be our heart fixation. And then the 5, 6, and 7, the head, there'd be our head fixation. That's one way of thinking about it. And of course, the types of our parents have a big impact on us. If we are married or have a life partner, that person exerts an influence on us, and they will be part of our psychological makeup. So we have introjects. So there's a lot of reasons why I think the Enneagram at its best is there to bring a mirror to help us see these patterns that run in our consciousness and to see what we're up to. So rather than getting too hung up on the theories or, trying to make the theories correct, theories are there to help us see more deeply into ourselves. So I would say if you're seeing those 3 types operating in you, Jill, who asked the first question, then observe them and see what's their relationship. How are they playing themselves out? It's not as random as we might initially think. I'll just say that there is a way that these things are ordered within our psyche. And the more we get insight into that, the more internal space opens up, we might say.
Beautiful. And I might just add, Russ, that sometimes another piece is the cultural overlay.
Yes.
And some of that is the culture of a country. Like Russ often talks about, for instance, that in Japan, there's a lot of very wonderful and also shadowy 6 energy, but there's also another piece, which is gender. So a lot of us feel that if people identify with female gender, that the kind of cultural training around that in most countries is to be like a 2. So there are many women who are 8s or 1s or whatever, but they feel like they have a lot of 2 in them, especially when they're in the relational field. And men often identify a lot with the 3 or the 8 archetype because that's sort of part of their cultural overlay. And then also Russ and I and quite a number of other teachers just also really feel that the more that we develop ourselves and are able to get some release from the compulsion of our fixation, we of course discover that we have all 9 energies within us and that there's something useful about working with all of them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very helpful. And if you're just joining us, we're here with Jessica Dibb and Russ Hudson, learning about their upcoming course, The Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, which begins Thursday, August 9th. And you can log on to thedepthapproach.com for all the details and to register. So back to questions here. We've actually got a couple questions from people who are fairly new to Enneagram. And so, for example, Candida is just asking, where can I find more info about these numbers? So before they take the course, how can they find out a little bit about the Enneagram?
You want me to start that, or do you want to, Jess?
No, I'd like to wax poetic about your book first. So, I mean, there are many books about the Enneagram, and I could be biased, but I think that I have a lot of agreement around the globe that I think the wisdom of the Enneagram that was co-written by Don Riso and Russ Hudson is one of the greatest offerings about the Enneagram on the planet today. So I'd highly recommend that book. There are other books by Russ and Don Riso, like Personality Types. There's also a couple of other authors, Dr. David Daniels, who wrote The Essential Enneagram, and Helen Palmer, who's one of the pioneers in our time of the Enneagram. All of those books would be worth reading. And also there are websites. So the EnneagramInstitute.com is the school that's associated with Russ and Don's work, and I would highly recommend you go there. You learn a lot about the types there. There's also the Narrative Tradition Worldwide Enneagram.com that comes out of Helen Palmer and David Daniels' school, and you'll learn a lot there. And if you Google, you'll also learn about a lot of other schools around the world that will have information on their websites. Anything you want to add, Russ?
Well, just that we live in a time where there's a lot of information about the Enneagram now. When I was first starting, there was very little. But now you can find websites, and there are discussion groups on Facebook and all sorts of things. I just say with the Enneagram, like I say about everything, the Latin phrase caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Most of the books I've read have something good in them. Most of them have something that's wonderful. But, like they say in 12-step meetings, take what's useful and leave the rest. All of them are a perspective on it. No one has the whole picture. We're all doing our best, but I think you'll read they're written on different levels of experience, and they're addressing different kind of levels of question. There are also books geared toward the Enneagram in the workplace. There are a number of books now on the Enneagram and Christianity, for example, which many people might be interested in. Father Richard Rohr has done some good books on that, and there are several new ones that have come out in the last couple of years on that topic. But if you're in that kind of interest, you start looking around, you'll find those books. But books, website, it's widely available. I think for this course, you don't need to be a master of the Enneagram, but if you have some familiarity with the basic notion of the 9 types and the basic structure of the Enneagram, I think you'll do just fine with us.
And Lisa, if I may just add to what was said, that this is a course that Russ and I feel very happy and confident that both beginners and very advanced people in the Enneagram, people that have been working with it for even decades, could come into. The depth approach to the Enneagram, we're really talking about the territory where we understand the map of our type and the instinctual drives and all these things, so that we can be, in a sense, liberated from the unconscious compulsion with them. And so if you're coming to the course as a beginner, we're really happy that we're going to introduce it to you from this perspective of how it liberates you to your best self. And yet, if you have been working for a long time, we intend for it to be so highly much of a practice group and an experiential group that we really imagine, or we hope, that we're all going to make a lot of progress together wherever we're starting from.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Let's go to a question here from Karen, who says, is it possible to work through or transcend the limitations of our number types? Is it basically being aware and not simply reacting?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. The whole point of it as Jessica was just saying, is to bring awareness to what we're usually identified with. I used to always tell my students, the part of us that wants to get rid of the ego is the ego. It's like our true nature, our presence, our being doesn't really care that we have an ego, can see it and hold it in compassion. And when we see and hold the patterns that we're usually caught up in, and we can see them with compassion and presence, then they tend to soften and open up and reveal intelligence in them that we might not initially suspect. So one of the things that I would say about this that relates to, what we were just talking about vis-a-vis books and internet and so forth, I think when people first learn this, there is one potential trap, which is getting overly hung up on typeitis. I just get all wanting to be endlessly described. Tell me more and more and more and more. Describe me, or running around typing at everybody else on the planet. And, we're kind of going to do that because it's exciting and fun when you first learn it, and you're kind of blown away that this makes sense, and now you can understand why those relationships were the way they were. But I would just offer to the people interested in this course and the people listening now that discovering your type is an amazing and wonderful thing, but it isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's a springboard into a process of spiritual and psychological development and maturation. It's to sort of see and recognize compassionately patterns that were necessary for our survival. I mean, these were not arbitrary. These are how we got through some potentially hairy situations when we were kids. And so they're to be respected. It's just coming to the deeper truth that that's not all there is to me. But to access these other parts where they aren't just occasional blinks from the universe, but something we can actually live more ongoingly, is a process of both seeing what we're caught up in and the elements of ourself that have become obscured to our usual perspective. So we work with both ends of it. So it's very much a developmental view of this work, and one that is based in presence, psychological discernment, and a lot of kindness, groundedness and kindness. We take all those three together as our orientation toward the different elements that we'll discover as we look deeply into the type structures.
Following up on what Russ was saying about really respecting how we've been able to utilize these personality types, if you will, and the particular defense mechanisms that we have and the particular coping strategies, we can respect them for that reason, and we can also, that they helped us with our childhood and life. We also can respect them because each type is formulated on a desire to be our real self, to get back to, if you will, our original nature, to, if you have a spiritual view, to get back, in a sense, to our essence or the divine in us. So it's not like they're just created out of nothing. What happens is the fear part of the part of us that feels separated from our original nature, from our authentic self, from God, if you will, makes a choice as an ego to try to recreate the quality that it thought it's lost. For instance, if you are a 9 and the quality of presence and the quality of life and the quality of the divine that you most have a gift for, which is peace and unity and seeing the fundamental unity of even seemingly contrasting things, then you, from the place of fear, you decide, well, it's not a conscious, it comes out of our temperament, but your whole organism kind of goes, well, how can I feel peaceful again? How can I get everyone else to feel peaceful? And from that smaller self, it does it by not creating waves, for instance. I mean, it's very complex. I'm just giving one or two tiny examples of it, but by not making waves, by going along to get along is a phrase sometimes that we use in the Enneagram community. That's how the 9's personality develops. but you can see that the real yearning in there is actually to be the original self of this unifying piece. So that's another reason that we can respect these patterns. And as we bring more presence to them, they help us open up to the authentic version of it that's always here.
Okay, thank you. Well, looking at the clock, we have time for a few more questions, but before we take those, it's probably a good time to go ahead and talk about the course a little bit. Again, it's called the Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, and this is going to be a really powerful 17-week journey under both Jessica and Russ's expert guidance, where you'll discover experiential practices to activate higher realization and embody the deepest, most sacred aspects of your Enneagram type in your everyday life. And the 17-week course takes place on Thursdays at noon Pacific, starting Thursday, August 9th. And if you can't join us live, that's fine. You won't miss the teachings. You'll receive audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. Also, I'd like to remind you that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until August 23rd in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. And everyone who registers receives the Experiential Depth Approach bonus collection. First, you'll receive an audio recording with Jessica and guest couples entitled Actualizing Deep Dyadic Love for Couples Through the Enneagram. Next, you'll get an audio recording from Jessica and Voices of the Enneagram called In Their Own Voices. Types Speak. Then you'll receive an audio dialogue with Russ and Robert Holden entitled The Enneagram and Purpose. Also, you'll get an audio dialogue hosted by Jessica with numerous Enneagram experts called Can the Diversity of the Enneagram Support Diversity Wellness in the World? And when you register by midnight Pacific on Thursday, August 2nd, you'll receive an additional bonus gift, and that is an audio dialogue with Russ Hudson and Cynthia Porgeol entitled Original Ideas Behind the Enneagram. So before we go any further here, Russ and Jessica, what are you both looking forward to sharing in this upcoming course? Let's go ahead and start with Russ.
Well, for one thing, I just always have such an amazing time in these courses, getting to know people, getting to understand what the questions are. And it's a learning experience for me, too. You know, I've been studying the Enneagram a long time, but people's questions and their experience and the things that we come together with in these courses are hugely helpful to me in both in my own personal journey, but also in understanding the teaching better, understanding the Enneagram itself, and how to be a better transmitter of what I have come to understand this work to be. And of course, it'll be fun to work with Jessica again and combine our different talents to provide something that I trust will be fun and rich. And I'm going to be as surprised as you at what she comes up with for her experiential work. And I also just love that we have the possibility through the shift to offer this, that we can use this wonderful technological platform to make this teaching available to a lot of folks that maybe can't necessarily come to the retreats and things we're doing in person. And also related to that, the fact that this really becomes a global community. If the past is any indication, we always have people tuning in and participating in the workshop from literally all over the world. And that's very exciting. It's an amazing meeting of the sort of global nature of this Enneagram work, but also the global work and outreach that the Shift Network is trying to do. So I think between the two, that provides something well worth my time. I think it's going to be fun, fascinating, and I expect to learn a lot of new things myself.
Mm. So I would say ditto to a lot of the things everything that Russ said. I think it is fun, and it is that we learn so much from the students and the community and the sharings. And, you know, there is really this sense that we all grow together. And then, you know, teaching with Russ, It is, I want to share with all of you, it's very alive when we do it, because I'm always listening deeply to Russ's. He's listening deeply to how to articulate things to everyone, that it's really accessible, this more expanded view of reality. How can he make it accessible? And then he loves having me add to that, but I'm listening so deeply to him that most of the exercises that I come up with are just right in that moment, alive to the teaching as it's coming through in that moment. So it makes it very creative for all of us. And then the community that gathers and the questions that they have and what you share, it gets included in his articulation, my articulation, and the exercises and all of that. And I also want to share that I was just having a meeting with some of the people at the Shift Network in this week, and they told me something that really underscores what Russ just said about the global nature of it. That the Enneagram Global Summit that we do every year, which is 5 days of about 50 teachers teaching the Enneagram, absolutely has the most global participation of any of the summits that the Shift Network puts on. It's striking. And so that was just incredibly gratifying for my soul to hear that, because we all feel that the Enneagram is a kind of unifying framework for the world that would allow people to have an objective and compassionate approach to their own growth, and an objective and compassionate view of everyone they come in contact with. And so it seems like that is being borne out just by the way that we have people from almost 150 countries around the world tune into the summit and to these courses. People from the Far East, from South America, I think every continent except for Antarctica, and we're working on that one.
Get some penguins.
Wonderful. Well, I have a question here from Nan, and you've both sort of touched on this in various responses, but let's just come right out with the question. How can this knowledge apply to your life and help you move forward? In other words, what's the practical application?
Why don't you start that one, Russ?
Okay. So, I know that by you asking that question, you care. You care about your life evolving and moving forward. And so for anybody who cares about that, their heart is in the right place. You know, they're willing to line up their life force, their energy, their actions to try to produce that growth. So for me, and I think all of us that have found the Enneagram, what is so powerful for us is that we learn all the ways that, even though that's our essential desire to grow and it's our wanting to move forward is, we're really dedicated, there are all these ways that we don't even realize we're getting in our own way. There are these unconscious patterns that are happening. And that there are these wounds, even these deep pains, these soul pains in our heart. And then ways that our body has started to move or be that are reflective of compensating or defending against or defending against those wounds. And I have never come across anything that is able to articulate so precisely and clearly why each of us is doing that, why we are distracting ourselves from that goal that we have, why we are forgetting that we want to wake up. And, we want to wake up, we want to evolve, but then we get triggered by a situation and we lose consciousness, we've lost presence, and 5 minutes or 5 seconds or 5 hours or 5 days goes by, and we're just sort of operating on autopilot in an unconscious way that's not helpful to ourselves or others. And I have been deeply moved by how the Enneagram offers us very precise. So, for instance, you might say that everyone has a little bit of a wound of feeling unlovable. I maybe not a little bit. I think most people, if they're not the Buddha, or Christ or some, awakened figure, they have a place where they feel unlovable. But it's incredible to learn that there are 9 different ways that a person can feel unlovable, or way that they describe feeling unlovable. That's so unique. And without that exact mirroring, you sometimes can't get to the real linchpin of what's causing you to become defensive and to unconsciously do behaviors because you're afraid you're unlovable. That knowledge it's literally gold. It's like a treasure. Now you can, as Russ and Don coined the term, catch yourself in the act of leaving presence. Catch yourself in the act of forgetting what you really want and who you really are. That awareness itself it's mana, and it's like 50% of the change. In addition to that, Russ and I and others have started to learn ways to create experiential practices that literally unhook us from those behaviors, where we're inviting our bodies and our hearts and our minds to relax and soften around the contractions and the wounding and the unconscious behaviors, and to open up to new pathways of being. And we feel that the Enneagram does it in a very precise way, because it gets so precisely into the nuances of why we don't feel good enough, or we feel unlovable, or we feel helpless, or we feel overpowered, or all of these different things that people can feel. And so it's invaluable. It's just, I used to do this work with people before I knew the Enneagram, and it was very powerful and potent, and we were having a lot of success. And then the Enneagram came into my life, and it exponentially increased the pathway by which people, it increased the rate, it accelerated the rate with which people could evolve. And it also helped to stabilize those evolutions, and people could prevent themselves from going back to sleep or getting into those unconscious patterns.
Yeah.
Russ, do you want to add anything?
Just that it also is a great help in understanding the people in our lives. Of course, if we're doing the work that Jessica was talking about, and we are doing our own inner work and getting ourselves out of the way, we're a little less reactive. We don't fall into the same traps with our loved ones, with our coworkers. But I think also just understanding that people have different needs. They're coming to us from different perspectives. They're all trying in their different ways to do something positive or loving for us. It really helps us have a benevolent translation of a lot of human activity. That even when people are angry, there's an intelligence there, and we get smarter about navigating our relationships in our human lives, because we are getting a broader sense of where people are coming from. We're not projecting our own motivations on everyone else and thinking they're thinking the same as we do. That's a hugely practical thing in business and in our personal lives. So again, it's a kind of a combination of seeing what we are on a deeper level and seeing what we get ourselves caught up in. Either one of those on their own would be insufficient, but you put the two together and it's amazing. I work with something called the Enneagram Prison Project, and we go into jails and prisons and work with people, even people incarcerated for life. And just that ingredient, the fact that those people can see what is human and dignified and good in them, and they can bring that to the wounds and tendencies in themselves that got them into trouble, got them into prison, becomes an enormous transformation for them. And I think for those of us who have more comfortable lives, shall we say, than the people who are incarcerated, to begin to see those two sides of our nature and bring them together is alchemy. It's the turning of lead into gold. It's not only practical, but it makes our practical activities more meaningful. such that we're actually imbibing the richness and preciousness of our life while we got it. Right?
Brilliant, Russ. And I would just add in just a minute that it is extremely useful for creating any kind of group, like at work or a family or a creative endeavor together, because to recognize in a very clear way what the different gifts are that each person can bring. And instead of thinking of that as opposite to you, to realize that that gift is going to help make the whole thing richer. It's just invaluable. I think it's the wave of the future, honestly.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Oh, looking at the clock, we are about out of time here. And we've got so many great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all. This has been just a fascinating hour. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your great questions. The Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram starts Thursday, August 9th. And again, you can visit thedepthapproach.com to learn more and to register. So, Jessica, Russ, any final words before we let you guys go?
So just feeling the sincerity of the questions that came in this very short time that we had together, I'm feeling a deep warmth in my heart and thrill in my soul and a real knowing that the group that's going to form from around the globe to create this practice community, this learning community, this experiential community of study and practice together is going to be awesome and sincere and authentic. And I am honored to join with any of you that wish to join us for this deep journey. We are going to be bringing a way of each moment inviting ourselves into a depth, a deeper orientation than the moment before, so that not only do we have the joy and the ecstasy really of feeling and contacting and living from our more authentic human nature and our deeper nature, but we also are able to bring this presence to our relationships, to our workplace, to our social participation. So I think that this course will serve real transformation in the world as well as our own transformation.
Yeah. Well, I'm really touched that we have this opportunity, as I already said. But I also think the timing of the course is very interesting. We're living, I think everyone can agree, we're living in a pivotal time. That whatever our beliefs or our political or religious affiliations, we can see that, to quote good old Bob Dylan, the times, they are a-changing. And the more of us that are interested in being anchored in the living moment, and the more of us that are really interested in learning every day, more and more honestly, what is it to be a compassionate force in this world? And every day to be able to use our God-given intelligence to make more wise and discerning choices as we move through this time of great change. I'm here basically not just to teach you this very interesting system, but I'm hoping the system that we're teaching you is in service of you finding what this place I was speaking of, so that we can all become more conscious participants in supporting intelligent changes in this time, where we can be pretty sure that the way things are going to be is not the way they were. We are definitely moving into a new period of human history, and may it be that we all go into that with our eyes and hearts and minds and bodies open and responsive.
Beautiful. Thank you again, Russ Hudson and Jessica Dibb. It's been a true pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much for your support, Lisa, and all the Shift Network.
Right. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.